This is SoulCharge, the podcast for women leaders to take the highest level of ownership of their power to create results now. I'm your host, Stacy B. Let's dive in. You've done everything that you were told to do. You've built the business, you've scaled the team, you have increased revenue. And still, there is this quiet rumble beneath the surface. If you are completely honest, that something doesn't feel right, that somehow, some way, beneath all of the success that you have achieved, you feel empty and, to be totally honest, imprisoned by it. It's because you've built what you've built through controlling, through being who you thought you had to be successful, and it's cost you everything that actually matters: yourself, your truth, and your power. This next chapter of what you are supposed to build requires you to unwind and unhook from the masks you thought you had to wear to be successful and the paradigms that taught you had to operate a certain way to be a leader in the world. I was recently sitting with one of my clients and we were talking about the journey that we had been on. And in our work together, we've unwound so many things. But like myself, she was feeling that even though she had gone through the process of realigning her energy, she had gone through setting right relationships, she had gone through taking the time to make sure the business was aligned, her vision was clear, the path forward was clear, she still felt like every time she would take a few steps forward, there were still these almost imaginary shackles that were holding her back. And that's exactly how I explained my past career. When I was in real estate, it was like I would take steps forward, I would redefine the vision, I would set the new goal, and then it still felt like the ball and chain was taking me backwards. And what we discussed and uncovered was very similar to what my journey was, which was that where I was coming from, where she was coming from, was a place of striving, controlling, manipulating, right? If I present it to the team this way, then they'll do X, versus this is my truth. This is what I stand for. This is my command. Everything was constructed and planned out. It was scripted. It was performed. That is the real problem, is that if you are feeling like you are taking steps forward, you are having the clarity, you have finally the vision in place, the team in place, the operations in place, and things are moving forward, but yet you still feel imprisoned, this is what's happening. You are coming from control, from striving, from a mask of performative leadership that isn't your truth. It is what you thought you had to be successful, and that paradigm has expired. It's no longer available for you to tap into. It is time to actually take off your masks and to unhook from what you thought you had to be. As women leaders, we have created our success coming from an operating system that was never ours to be had. An operating system of thinking we had to be different to be successful, thinking that we had to be like a man in a man's world to be successful. And it's not about that the man's world was bad. It's just that there is a different way of being and achieving that's available for us that is aligned with how we operate. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So let's talk about what this real problem is, right? This problem of really building success from a place of survival. So as a woman, when you are leading in survival, when you are leading from a place that isn't necessarily your truth, how that shows up is this feeling of constant striving. So it's like constantly this push, and it's coming from this need to control. And so when we are striving and we're literally looking at our life and business like a big chessboard, right? And we're going, if I move this 2 steps here, I'm going to move this 3 to the side here. And the game becomes about control versus connection and what's highest and best for ourselves and the bigger plan that we have. Where that's coming from and why it fits into survival instead of thriving is because that is how you have learned to be safe. You have learned that if you control the people and the moves on some level, you're able to control the outcome. And as long as you are staying in that place, what's happening as a woman is you are discounting your knowing and your trust because you're trying to essentially predict an issue before it happens, which is what we're amazing at, and that's why this can be so confusing, is we're trying to predict and control, but when we're doing that, we're not just getting ahead of it, we're actually exiting our bodies. We're actually getting out of our bodies and out of our truth. And so that is a sneaky way that, striving can happen is you think you're doing something that is in anticipation. We are taught to predict and get ahead of things. But the problem is when we do that at the expense of our knowing and trusting ourselves, we actually override the entire system. And so the idea here is coming back to what is your truth? What is your knowing combined with what's the outcome and trusting that you can be supported in that all unfolding. Because it's one thing to try and control all of the steps, but it's another thing when you're being strategic while you're connected to yourself. This is all about leading in an embodied way. It is all about ending the illusion of separation because every time we try to control something, we're getting out of our bodies. We're getting out of the embodiment, and we cannot lead from the energetic alignment that is up for us to claim if we're constantly leaving our bodies. We have to be in a connected internal state first, because when we do that, we end the illusion of separation. We're not separate from where we are and what we want, and we can collapse the experience of getting there by being in our bodies, by really landing there and being there. So constantly striving is what I want you to look out for. The other thing is, and I feathered this in the last comment, but it's this idea of this emotional disconnection in our leadership. In a prior episode, I talked about the importance of almost filing away your emotions, right? Not necessarily letting your emotions lead the business. There's a fine line by being in tune with your emotions and letting them lead. And so what I'm offering to you is actually, can you be curious about your emotions? Can you tune into them and almost look at it as a sifting process? And so being emotionally disconnected from yourself is actually impacting the business in such a way because you're not putting into place what you need to be supported. This is most often what I see. And so if you're willing to put the things in place where you feel supported, that gives you the space to connect internally first, right? Connect inside and again, not let the emotions drive. This is not about allowing your inner child to be the reckless driver of your business. This is about honoring, seeing, and holding the space to be seen and heard by ourselves for ourselves. It's so often what I see is we're looking for the things we're not giving to ourselves in our businesses, with our team, and in our careers, right? And it's this idea of taking that power back and saying, anything that I'm looking for externally, am I giving that to myself? That's a great question. Am I giving that to myself? Am I honoring myself? And the truth of the matter is that if you're constantly striving, proving, performing, you're in a state of emotional disconnection. And that matters because if you don't know how you feel, that turns into disconnection and there's no embodiment. And leadership in where we're going is all about embodiment. It's all about that unshakable confidence. It's about that certitude, right? It's about moving through the world in such a way that you are, I often say this to the team, like you are the oak tree. An oak tree is unmoved. It doesn't matter how hard the wind's blowing. It doesn't matter, which way the wind is blowing. The oak tree isn't moving. And that's what embodied leadership is. That is what the energetics of leadership want from you and is up for you to claim in this next chapter. When we look at building in survival, what I also see a lot of is making strategic decisions from fear, performance, or people pleasing. And it's like so fascinating to me because the clients that we work with at SoulCharge are the coolest women. They're so successful. They're so driven. And yet they are still hiding behind people pleasing and performing and structuring things just so that the team approves. And so it's like they're no longer looking for that from their parents. Their parents have just morphed into their team. And that's what we want to end that war. If you're not structuring the business around what frees you, what lights you up, what happens is that imprisonment happens within the business where the people that are here to actually support you, it turns into this interesting dynamic, a toxic dynamic over time, where you find yourself as the leader of the company, almost like reporting to them because you're trying to get them on board. You're trying to convince them that they're safe. You're trying to convince them that all is well, all at the expense of yourself. And so those are some ways that leading in survival can really show up. And it's so important to see this because this isn't about your team. This isn't even about the numbers you're trying to hit in business. This is about representing the next paradigm of leadership for women. And what is required of us is a different way of being. It is a different way of being, leading in all of our glory, saying what needs to be said, leading totally embodied, moving through the world as our future self, and not holding back on our expression, not just in what we say, but how we move through the world. That is what is up for us next. And these are the things to be aware of that can be in the way of you leading in that way. So there's 3 things that I want you to be aware of in the process of taking off these masks. Take off the masks, unhook from the energy, and really reclaim your truth and step into your truth. So when I talk about unmasking, when I talk about taking the masks off, what I'm really wanting you to imagine and think about is, where am I showing up in performance in my life? Those are the masks that I'm talking about. And so a mask could be, where are you performing instead of being present? Another mask could be, where am I restructuring things in avoidance of what needs to be said? Where am I people pleasing? Where am I looking for validation when I know what's true for me? These are masks. The masks have been a perceived way that we have been safe. The way that we've kept ourselves safe, out of the line of fire, where we have stayed out of conflict, where we have literally just been safe in our perception, is keeping these masks on. And we have to take them off to really lead. We have to let the world see, who are we really to our teams? What do we really represent? And they will either get on board because they're aligned and they're supposed to be a part of your team, or you will very quickly filter out who is not supposed to be alongside you for the true you to lead and blaze the trail that you are supposed to blaze. Right now, there are masks that you have to take off. And the first way to do that is to identify, where are you hiding behind people pleasing, validation, things you're tolerating, things you're justifying. These are just a few things to get your juices flowing. And I want you to bring attention to these masks so that you can see There's some part of you that's using these masks to stay safe or not show the part of yourself that you feel is too big, too bold, or has been the part of you, and this was my story, the part of me that every time I am in full momentum, something would happen. Someone would come at me, some chaos would happen, and it was always at that peak. It was always at the peak where I perceived I would lose control. I never let it go. I never let it go past that point. But in my brain, I always associated that if I go all in, someone's going to come at me or something bad's going to happen. So I'm just going to go all the way up until, like, if it were a rating system out of 10, I'm just going to go to level 8. I'm going to hang out there for a minute or two, but then I'm going to self-destruct because that's not my truth. I'm just giving you an example of how these masks are not always easy to catch. You could easily look at my life and say, Stacy, you've built this big life, all of these achievements, and I'm still playing small. This is probably what's happening for you. On some level, if we are wearing these masks, we are self-destructing in the moments where we're letting the masked version of ourselves drive. And so this is about, first, as always, shining a light on what's going on, and then unhooking. Really not necessarily, and this is what I say a lot in the work in SoulCharge, it's like, it's not necessary to go back to the why. It's not necessary to dig up all of the graves you've already buried. It's not necessary. But what is necessary is you've got to call yourself out and up. Because if you don't call yourself out, you can't rise. You cannot rise. And so part of the part of you that is going through the turmoil when you're wearing these masks, that part of you likely needs you to tell yourself that I'm not going to abandon you when someone comes at us next time. I'm just going to use my example. If we are 10 out of 10 on that rating scale that I just gave an example of, if I'm operating and we're rocking and rolling and someone tries to tell us that we're too big, or we're threatening them, or we're doing something that is impacting them when we know we're not, and we're working for the highest and best good, I'm not going to choose their discomfort over our truth again. I'm not going to wear the mask of pleasing and putting people first. I'm going to protect you. So that's an example of how do we unhook from wearing these masks. It always comes down to a part of ourself that needs to be seen and heard and trusted. There's a part of ourselves, if you are wearing a mask on a topic, there's a part of you that's wearing that mask because that mask has been a safe place, because you've self-betrayed on some level. You've abandoned yourself on some level. And that's actually the disconnect as to why you feel like you have to show up in a mask. And so if you actually say, I don't need the mask anymore because I'm not going to disconnect from myself again. I'm going to bring this into the light. I'm going to see that I don't have to wear this mask to be successful. I don't have to protect myself in that way. You have to remember, everything that we're doing boils down most of the time to safety, right? And if we can end the illusion that we have to go outside to get safety, AKA wearing the mask allows us to show up in a way to the outside world that if we show up in that way, they can't get in. They can see and perceive us in a certain way that allows us to continue to stay safe. Let's bring this back to the business. When we talk about unmasking and unhooking, what is driving the masks in your business right now boils down to conversations you don't want to have because of some projection, some reason that you're making up that's actually holding you and the people that need to hear that conversation back. That's the impact that you don't understand. As leaders, we always are thinking about, oh, this is uncomfortable. This isn't necessarily a conversation I want to have. When you have the conversation and you free yourself, you're freeing the business and the people involved. And that is your responsibility as a leader. If you're going to be a leader, you need to own that. And if you're not willing to own that, you need to consider a different position, because leadership is not tiptoeing. It is not avoidance. It is leading yourself and others to the finish line that you know you can do together for your mission, for your movement, whatever it is that you are building and you're representing. So a quick ritual tool, I love leaving you all with tools. A quick tool that I use when I feel like there's a mask here, there's something that I'm avoiding, is a quick ritual is simply this. Close your eyes and ask yourself, what am I overriding right now that needs to be heard? What part of myself needs to be seen? And then pause for 5 to 10 seconds. And it is fascinating what will come up. It is fascinating if you pause and you listen, what a resource Beautiful You is on answers that you need. And I'm going to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole for just a moment. The tool that I just gave you is brilliant when applied anytime. If you are facing a key decision, if you are up against, a leadership decision you need to make, if you are up against the next level, that bold move that you're trying to make, ask yourself the question, what do I need to see right now? And pause. Even for 10 seconds, you will be amazed at what comes through. You will be absolutely amazed. How many times, if you just pause and ask yourself the question that you're seeking the answer to, the truth will be revealed. You are a well of resource and information and brilliance if you allow yourself the space to pause and inquire and let it unfold. The biggest piece around this idea of putting the masks down is unmasking these pieces and parts of ourselves to really lead boldly. Isn't just about the leadership. It's also about the commitment to what we originally started all of this for. As leaders, we start the mission for a reason. And once we build the success, it's so interesting how many women leaders find themselves imprisoned in the world that they built. You can undo what you've built without blowing up all of the goodness. You can shift and make changes so that your schedule is more supportive of this chapter and season than the prior. You can receive the support that you deserve and structure things in a way so that you are only working in your genius. You can do all of this, and you can trust yourself that if you take these steps, if you decide to lean in and say, you know what, I recognize that I feel imprisoned in my own life, personally and professionally. I'm going to take a step back. And I don't mean take a step back like revenue changes. I mean just like contemplation step back, reflection step back. I'm going to reflect on what is true for me right now. What is it that I need to be supported in what I want to do next? That's what I mean by take a step back and build what needs to be put in place around you to make that a reality. Because here's the thing we don't understand is when we take the step back and we're really honest with ourselves about what is needed, and not just needed, but what you actually want next. When you allow that to be expressed, here's the thing, is that is the innovation and that is the excitement and the renewal that the company and the team needs too. We're not supposed to just build this stagnant, business that is the same. Obviously, everything is growing and alive. And I think what we forget as women leaders is we get stuck. Everything else is moving forward in their success, and we're literally achieving everything we set out to achieve. But we forget ourselves in the process. We forget that our needs shift and we need to protect those. We need to be the one that is watching our six and lead in that way, because when we lead in that way, that is showing the team how to take ownership. That's what all of this is about, is how can we lead and impact our teams in such a way that they can take radical ownership. It starts with us. It starts with owning that, hey, I've been showing up with these masks on. I've been prioritizing other people's comfort over my own. Hey, you know what? I haven't been making sure and demanding that my schedule protects this time that I work best. I haven't taken ownership. That awareness and admission is the first step. Admit it and then take the necessary action to be different, to lead differently, to put the things in place that are supportive of you and not be guilty. This is not about guilt or feeling bad. This is about owning what you need and what you want and making sure you get it. That is what the leadership paradigm we're stepping into represents. And that is why we need you to take your masks off and stop pretending and stop performing and actually start being all of you, being the unapologetic, fierce, badass that you are, and to own it. That is what we want. Are you loving SoulCharge? If so, hit the subscribe button, leave a review, and share an episode. We want to bring powerful content to women leaders each week so that women can be unleashed to create the results that they want now. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.